15 common conflicts that happens between the contractor and the PMC or the engineer. So these are the very common conflicts that always happens between the contractors and the engineers. So engineer, even though in some cases he might be a neutral party, or in some cases there will be a representative of the employer. So the relationship between the PMC and contractor, or the engineer and the contractor, has to be as smooth as possible to complete the project in a hassle-free nature. So these are the common conflicts that can be managed very easily. So let's go one by one. So delayed submission of the shop drawings or detailed drawings in case of the large EPCs. This is a very common issue that is between the engineer and the contractor. So you should have a drawing schedule and a drawing log. So there should be an accepted planned schedule between both the contractor and the engineer that we are going to submit the drawings on so-and-so date, and it is going to get approved on so-and-so date. So even though it is not practically possible to maintain the exact planned dates, who have worked in the contracts or construction might know this, but still this will give you a cautious leverageness that to avoid large delays, and there are possibilities to mitigate also. Not all drawings are going to be having the same kind of intensity or the same kind of complexity. The next one is discrepancy in the BOQ of the drawings, especially the quantities. The quantities in the BOQ will always have conflicts with quantities in drawings in large projects. Everybody might have faced this issue in projects. So what should you do is that do this as an exercise even before the starting of the projects, and start sending the RFIs, start communicating with the clients in a very earlier stage, especially the engineers who are the experts who can take decisions on this. So the communication is the key protocol for this. In some contracts, there might be the clauses that will very clearly say that the drawings will always precede the quantities of the BOQ. Or in some contracts, the BOQ contracts will be the base, and any variations in the drawings will be compensated. So it depends on the contract also. Work without prior approvals. So for example, this usually happens in case of variations. So getting into a work without an actual written approval from the engineer may put the contractor in a situation that he might not be able to claim the bill in the later period. So always get a written WIR from the engineer and then start working, even though how emergency or urgency the situation is. So variation instruction disputes. So don't, as I said above, don't proceed with the variation without written approval from the engineer or the PMC. They will say that just do it, that will give the approval later, which will be a blunder. You will feel regret at the end of the project when you go with the claim. So better avoid this, and in a very polite and humble way, ask them for an variation request, or send an email and get a confirmation from them. If it is more urgent, then proceed with the variations and then formalize it later. So no project is as urgent that it can continue in variation without an email. So we just create an utopian mentality that the variation is an urgency, that giving approval for the variation is not an urgency, that it's going to take so many approvals from the hierarchy. So improper material submittals. So whenever a material has to be submitted, an MIR has to be recorded, and the material approval has to be given prior to the quality department, and that has to be approved by the quality engineers of the PMC or the engineering team. So this has to be meticulously done even before, well before the material is going to reach the site. even once after the placing the PO, or in many cases that you have to get the material approval to place the PO. So that phase has to be expedited because long lead items, long lead procurement items will always impact the critical path of the project and it will affect the project's end date. Quality concerns. So it might be during the constructions or it might be during the executions. The quality audits of the engineers arises, NCRs, non-conformity reports. So how we can avoid this? So everybody knows that this is a very common scenario that happens in every project. So please have a quality checklist. Please have an internal audits for the quality regularly so that we might not end up in such situation in front of the client or in front of the engineer. So delay in response from PMCs. Usually the approvals of the documents, procedures, drawings, whenever you submit to the PMC and they, even though there is a given cycle of 14 days or 7 days in the contract, that usually doesn't take in the certain period. Even though the PMCs maintain that we give approvals in 7 days, they don't give approval. The comment might be very heavy and you might not even proceed with the work with that approvals. So then again, the contractor has to work on it. He has to submit it back. And again, it may take 7 days. So these cycles and these delays have never been recorded or planned in a schedule. So what we usually do is that we form a task force for project approvals. So don't just send the documents in the upload the documents in the document control system and then it goes to the PMC and PMC gives comment and it comes back. And for example, sometimes the document, the contractor will be owner of the document, or sometimes the vendor will be the owner of the document, or the subcontractor will be the owner of the document. And that will again go to the subcontractor. The subcontractor will take some time to work on it and again he will submit to the contractor. The contractor will have an initial review and then he will submit to the client. This is going to be a very uncontrolled life cycle of document approvals. So what can you do is have a task force, list down the critical documents, not all the documents. If you are going to have 1,000 documents, let's say we have 1,000 documents in this project, not all 1,000 documents are going to be critical. 15 to 20% of the documents only will be really very critical. And that too, if you bifurcate based on the phase of the project, will still go down. So those documents, we create a task force and the PMC, engineers, contractors and the subcontractors sit together and they see what is viable and what is not viable to get the approval done. So that is the most important way that you can stop or you can minimize the delays in response from the PMCs. Measurement disputes usually comes when a work has been completed and there should be a joint measurement. And when you submit a bill, that bill might get rejected by the engineer saying that no, we are not approving the quantity you have set as you have completed at the site. So better to avoid this, you should have a joint survey. Okay, and usually most of the projects has that. Very few project has that. First you have to measure and submit me and then I will go and measure and come back as an engineer. That's not a good procedure. Joint measurements might be done to avoid such issues and have photographs together and have reports together signed by both the parties. Site access restrictions. So whenever a contractor takes a project, the entire plan of the project will depend on the site access. He might be a main contractor or he might be a subcontractor. He might, the contractor might depend on other contractor to complete the work. So this has to be controlled by the engineer. So the engineer is the one who controls the master schedule and what other contractors has to work at what time of the phase. If one contractor delay, that might affect the other contractor. So site access, especially in infrastructure projects, roads and railways, site access is a killer for the contractor. When the contractor has planned his resources and machineries based on the planned schedule, and the planned sequence. When the planned sequence gets affected, it affects the entire project schedule and it definitely affects the project delivery date. So late information releases. So if an information is critical and it is required to start a work, or if it is required to start a drawing, or it is required to start a procurement, that has to be properly released on time by the engineer. Even though the engineer might forget, the contractor shall take the initial steps to remind them and keep in close follow-ups with the engineers that we need such certain informations and these informations will affect so and so works. So that has to be kept communicated, not just recording it for the later information, because completing a project on time will give credibility to both the entire client team, employer team, as well as the contractor. So we have to work like a single family and maintain a rapport with those stakeholders. And please don't have the ego that I'm a client, I'm an engineer, that you are working for me. That will kill the project for sure. Ambiguity in specifications. So usually, most of the contracts will have the hierarchy of precedences in the document. So when there is ambiguity between a specification and a BOQ, which takes the first priority? When is the ambiguity between a scope and the drawing? So there are hierarchy levels written in FIDIC form of contracts or in a general form of contracts. In some contracts, it might not be available. So in that case, the RFIs has to be required for clarification from the clients so that it will avoid delays and it will not cost the contractor heavily, and later it might become a claim and the employer will reject the claim. Dispute over safety compliance is a very, very sensitive issue that safety and quality will never be compromised. We can make here and there paper differences, works in engineering and procurement or the construction, but these two things directly affects the credibility and human lives. So always have no compromise on the safety, but this is meticulously happens in large oil and gas projects or large mega projects where every safety will have a tightened work. Even inside the contractor, there will be always a conflict between the safety engineer and the project engineer. The project engineer wants to perform. The safety engineer doesn't allow him to perform without proper safety, which is a good culture which is being developed. Both the guys will always have a conflict between them because the project engineer focuses on productivity, the safety engineer focuses on safety. So actually, people think that the safety slows down the project. It's not so. The safety controls the project. Whenever the safety is out of hand, if something happens at site and it results in the fatality, that is going to cost you your project both in terms of time and cost heavily. So safety has to be treated as a guardian, and your internal safety has to be very, very dedicated than the external HSEs. And that rapport between the contractor HSE and the client HSE will give a very smooth relationship in running the project. Payment certification delays. So even though the take here is that if the payment gets certificate delayed, the cash flow gets delayed. If the cash flow gets delayed, the contractor could not bring the resources at the right time. So the project will delay. Payment certifications should be treated on high emergency. Even though any comments, the engineers has to bypass the system and try to reach the contractor to clear this. You have to take decisions. You just cannot hide under the documents and the system. There are many ways for the engineers and the PMCs just to escape their duty or not to risk their duty by saying that no, the contract says so and so, I will not say no. You are an engineer, you are an expert, and you are a leader who has to take a decision right away for the sake of the project. So for everybody working in the project, the one goal is not their company or themselves. The ultimate goal should be the completion of the project. So that attitude will helps the engineer understand that this PMC, this payment certification, this interim payment certification is going to be a lifeline for the contractor, and it has to reach them on time. So please work towards it. That will create a very good culture when you fight for your contractor's payment inside the PMC setup. The contractor's project engineer will fight for you inside the contractor setup to complete the project. So if that PMC, that addition of value between both the stakeholders will take the project and the culture of the entire construction industry ahead. Unrealistic schedule. Both the contractor and the engineer knows that this schedule is not going to work. They make schedules just to compromise the management or compromise the top level budgeting people. But that is not going to help both of you. Make a realistic schedule and convince the other parties that don't worry, this is going to be the final schedule. We are asking 6 months and you are asking us to complete in 3 months. Please understand that it can't be completed in 3 months with these resources. Either if you are going to accelerate it, we need additional manpower, which is going to cost us high. Or in the same pace, we can finish in 6 months and we will not come for another UOT if nothing bad happens in this 6 months. But if you give 3 months, we are definitely going to come up with another UOT after the 3 months. Because it is not technically possible to complete it with the limited resources. So that has to be convinced by both of them towards the project higher managements. Verbal instructions on site. So always this we have seen, I think this is the third thing we are seeing. But this is especially to the site instructions, because mostly in site, people are not aware of the change order issues and how it is going to change into a claim and how it will affect the project in later stages. So that is why we have to be very cautious in getting a verbal approval. So better try to put in writing at any form, even after the project completion, that you just send an email that this we have received so-and-so instruction to do so-and-so work at site, and we are proceeding with this based on your oral confirmation. If you are against this work, please send a rejection email. Just record that email and just proceed with the work. This will protect you a lot in later stage than doing work without any instructions. So please avoid these common pitfalls and common frictions between engineers and the contractors. Thank you.